uh, let's have fun. That's all I can say.
It's a good plan.
Okay, hello everyone. So let me start with introductions and just tell everyone what we're doing here. So this is Spring Edition 2023 of Editors Roundtable. This is an event I generally do for members of my premium course, the Editing Chef. But since it's about spreading the word about how we film editors, video editors are the coolest people in the Hollywood and not only Hollywood, right? So it's live on YouTube for everyone to see and enjoy. And today I'm joined by 5 amazing editors that we actually had with Ricardo Cosolino, right, on Cut Review podcast. So it's nice to see all of you. All of you have like numerous credits on IMDb, but I will just name one. Daysha Broadway with I Wanna Dance with Somebody, Daniel Garber with How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Nicholas Monsour with Nope, Rodrigo Brazão with My Mind and Me, and Alex Familian with Appendage. Feature, not a short film, even though he edited a short film as well. More on that in a moment, I guess. And guys, just really, I don't want to go into longer introductions because I only can invite people to listen to the full episodes you did with us on Cut to Reveal. But as a warm-up, I just want to ask you a question. What releases this year are you most looking forward to? So, Nicholas, you're first on my screen. So.
I'm first up. Wow. It's a tough question because I do like huge catch-ups when I come out of a job when I've seen nothing for months, and then I'm like, okay, what was all the stuff I missed? That said, for numerous reasons, but some of them because I actually I am curious how you blow up a pipeline. That was one that was on my list for sure early on, as soon as I heard about it. Just because I'm so fascinated by a few things that movies always seem to get wrong. One is which is like political groups and activism. It's like always somehow untranslatable onto screen or doesn't quite just maybe doesn't reflect reality that the filmmakers actually know anything about. Same with like music performances and like university classrooms. They're like always bad. But I watched How to Blow Up a Pipeline, and I thought it was really refreshingly realistic from my experience and understanding of the kinds of people and things that go on and debates and ethical dilemmas that happen with that. So anyway, that was one. That's the first one that came to mind. So I'm glad I got to saw it. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at what else is coming out this year. Oppenheimer will be cool just to see what Hoyte van Hoytema did, since I got to work with him on Nope, and I'm always curious about that.
That's cool. Daysha, how about you?
I was excited to see John Wick 4. I was really excited about that, and I got to go to the premiere, which was awesome. And but I think coming up, I'm excited for the new Indiana Jones movie because it actually looks good. I think the trailer looks pretty good, and I'm a little freaked out by those sort of the youthening that they did on him with AI and everything. But I mean, I feel like it's something that is just going to be like a tool that we continue to use. So kind of excited to see how they use it in that feature.
Yes, that's very interesting. Yeah. Like it's a box, once opened, you cannot close it. So I guess, it's interesting to
keep track of
guess.
it, like just kind of see where it's going. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Rodrigo, how about you?
Hi. So I think it's coming up, but I'm very excited to see The Little Mermaid, because I think it's a movie that I really enjoyed when I was a kid, and I really like it. and I wanted to see how they dealt with all those new characters being like real animals, for example, like the fishes and the crab and all the stuff. And I think it's going to be a very beautiful movie. And I have a tendency to like those like very pretty films, but I don't know because I enjoy a lot of the original animated film. So I'm curious to see how they handle that transposition to real life. So it's gonna come in. I don't know. I think in 2 weeks, right? So I really want to watch
Yeah.
it.
Cool. Daniel.
Oh my gosh, I wish I had a better answer to this. There are so many things I'm excited about, but I think a lot of the things that I'm really looking forward to seeing are things that have already premiered on the festival circuit and that are just slowly making their way to theaters, or some of them are already out and I haven't seen them yet. Like I haven't seen Joyland yet, which looks amazing. I haven't seen Past Lives, that also looks great. So very excited to check out some of those.
Pretty cool. Alex.
How to Blow Up a Pipeline was definitely on my list. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I got to see it before this. But that was definitely one of my more like anticipated releases of the year. And then this movie, I actually don't know if it's still in theaters. I definitely missed it if it's not, called Sick of Myself. It's like Christoph Bjorgli. I think I'm saying his name. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. But his movies are like always extremely uncomfortable, but also hilarious and like present like a really unique like social satire that I just love wallowing in that like uncomfortable sort of feeling every time I see his movies. And I think this is his second feature, and so I've heard good things, but I wasn't able to see it yet, so I'm excited for that to come out on streaming eventually.
Cool. Was mine. So I'm looking forward to Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse because like the first part, Into the Spider-Verse, was, I don't know, it felt like surprised me in a very good way. I didn't expect it to be as good. So I'm looking forward to see what they did with another animated version of that Spider-Verse variation on Spider-Man. We'll see. Okay, guys. Move on. I just want to describe how it's gonna work. So first, 3 sections. The first one is where I will basically ask, everyone will answer, right? And there will be like 3 questions. And then everyone goes for his own, version of the answer, right? In the second part, we just have the conversation, and I is that you basically can ask the questions that about others' work, right? And in the first section, we basically have Q&A, so people to the ending chef, but also on YouTube can ask their questions. So if anyone has a question, just drop them in the comments. But still, we want to get them, so that's the last section, right? So we can move on, and we'll start with a general question to all of you. So this question was actually asked in the first edition of the Roundtable by one of the people from the, and it's a question about your as a film editor in the edit suite, right? What have you learned from it? And we'll go now. So Alex, you're the first on the
Oh, great. Letting me in the edit room is the biggest mistake. No, I don't know. That's a tough question. I feel like probably, I would like to keep a more of an open mind. I think sometimes it can be easy to get stuck on like how a scene is working, and you may not even realize it. And so I feel like, I don't know if I can point to a specific example, but I feel like just in general, my mistakes might be getting tied to a piece of a temp cue or temp music, or the structure of a scene, or maybe even the structure of a sequence. Just getting tied to things like that, because you get used to it and you watch it so many times. That's probably something I fall prey to more often than not. What was the second? Was there a second part of the question?
Learned from the mistakes. So I guess in this case, the way you answered it, I'm curious to hear how you overcome it, because I have this struggle as well on my projects, smaller projects.
Yeah.
That's what I
I think, showing people edits is like huge, or having people in the room and just watching it and like feeling their energy is like a big thing. Or just like watching sometimes I'll just make an export and watch it on my phone, like in my bed, or, in a different room or something like that. And somehow that changes the perspective on the scene sometimes, which can be really helpful. And I've also just learned to like have a bit more of an open mind, where I feel like sometimes an executive or someone might watch a cut and I might, I think earlier in my career, I would have been like, like sort of resistant to a lot of things. But now I've really learned to be like, okay, like, this, they said something, it might not be working perfectly, or maybe, the sequence before might not be setting this thing up perfectly. But I think, it's just made me want to have a bit more of an open mind about all that stuff. And, you can really change things around until you picture lock. So it's just about, I think, just having that willingness, not getting too crazy, but having that willingness, is important.
Yeah. I always like think about that Da Vinci quote, right? The piece of artwork is never finished; it's only abandoned. You have to, there's a point where you have to say like it's.
At some point, you have to call it. Yeah, you just have to
yeah.
call it at some point. I mean, yeah. Sometimes you can just tinker and tinker and tinker. Yeah. But like, I don't know if I can ask a question, but like, in How to Blow Up a Pipeline, like, I'm so curious. Like, there's so much building that happens in that film, and like, I'm so curious if that was in the script, or if you're like moving certain scenes around to help create these like sequences that keep building, or, like something like that. I could see myself getting sort of stuck on like, oh, it was like this in the script, or it's like, in this cut it worked this way, or I don't know. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think we, in general, it was actually pretty close to the script. I mean, there were some scenes that we removed, but the orders generally didn't change all that much over the course of the edit, which was kind of a surprise to me, because I sort of expected there to be a lot more reshuffling that happened. But I think there were a lot of things that were very intentionally structured in ways that weren't immediately obvious to me even, but that ended up feeling very necessary by the end of the edit. So that was, yeah, I was actually very pleasantly surprised to find that there was, in some ways, less for me to do than I thought.
Right.
But yeah, what you're saying also totally resonates with me. I think the idea that you can very often get set in your ways, or like once you've gotten to a certain point where it works like 70%, you're like, I don't want to break this thing that is like 70% of the way there, even if breaking it is the thing that is absolutely necessary to get it to like 95% or something. And I think a lot of the time I feel like I'll try to, or at least this is something I used to do a lot more, where I would try to reason through a lot of decisions, engage in really long conversations with the director or directors, to try to figure out, like, I mean, there are some instances in which I've worked with, multiple big creative voices in the room, like 2 directors on one project, or a director and a producer, and they'll be duking it out. And I'll like attempt to reason through the different approaches to the scene and say, well, I think this one is going to be better, and I would side with this person over this person. But at the end of the day, there's really no substitute for trying things out. And so often I've found that I've been really surprised by things that I thought really wouldn't work. There was a short documentary that I edited where the director really wanted to try split screen. And I was like, that's not going to work. I really don't like split screen. I mean, maybe De Palma can do it, but like, I'm not going to do that. And she was like, just try it. And I was like, okay, yes, I trust you. I'll try this out. If we don't like it, we can throw it away. And it was great. And I ultimately loved working with the split screen technique in that situation, even though it's something that I'm ordinarily not that drawn to as a device. So yeah, I think I've really tried to open up a little bit more and talk less and just try to cut more.
Yeah, I think it's one of the editing commandments, right? Just try it. Just trying to talk it through. Yeah. It's all.
we live in an age where, it's just so easy to do that now. It's like, why not? We don't have to cut the film and paste it and do all this stuff. Yeah, or do the whatever, the optical stuff for split screens and all that crazy stuff. So it's like more often than not, it's worth just trying it. Yeah.
Exactly. Daniel, to add to that, like, do you have any, like, mistake in the past that you recall that you learned from? Do you have something like that?
Like a specific mistake. I don't know. I mean, I guess I think that a lot of these things end up getting corrected over time. Like, I don't think that I've had any mistakes that have been set in stone. It's more like, I mean, as Alex was saying, just being resistant to a certain approach. And that my resistance was the mistake more than anything else.
Copy that. Rodrigo, how about you?
So I think you could a lot of like technical mistakes, but I don't think that counts. But there's a lot of technical things you should do while editing, like especially organizational stuff that you have to do, like have a lot of your sequences updated and remember to save something here and there, especially because you can always come back to something. And I think in the beginning, I might have been too eager to just do it, and you just keep editing the same sequence, and then you say, "Uh-oh, I think I just lost everything I did, and I want to go back to that," and you don't have it. So it's in a more like creative way. I agree with what Daniel and Alex were saying, more in a sense of understanding that there's a creative voice besides yours in a project, which is the director and the producer, and sometimes you can really disagree with them, but you have to meet them and do the best of what they want this film to be, because it's ultimately, and that sometimes can be a big mistake, because you just keep fighting, and instead of trying to see what they want this to be, it's usually good, because that's the main creative voice in the project. So you should meet them there and try to do the best of what they want and not just what you think is the best. So it's remembering that you're not the director of the film. It's good sometimes. It's hard, but you got to remember that, because it's important to make the best film possible. Otherwise it's just going to be something between what you want and what other creative voices will want, instead of being a cohesive thing that's definitely going to be better.
I recall this line from Cut to the Monkey, Robert Negart book, where he says basically you want to be a filmmaker who edits, right? But at the same time, that's something that like I'm thinking as well. Like, you never want to come across as an editor who really wants to be a director, right? Because that's a red flag for the director, for the producer, right? So while you want to be a filmmaker in general with your approach to editing, right? You don't want to be that guy who tries to push his idea. Or something like that, right?
And there's a lot of psychological thing, I think, and also interpreting and understanding what a director wants. It's a hard job, and I think it's the best thing. One of the best things an editor could have is just like a good perception of what a director really wants, and make it as they want it the best way possible. It's
ideally we know it better than they do, right? About what they about
I don't know.
what they want. About what they want, I mean, right?
Know.
We know better what they want than they do. You know what I mean?
You said it.
I just realized it may
Rodrigo doesn't
sound
want
like...
to go on record saying
that. Sometimes you have to think how to frame it differently. I mean, they're always right. I mean that we basically, very often should be like a psychologist, right? Where you're like digging deeper, and basically you what they want.
Yes.
Even if they don't know how to like describe it, right? So that's what I meant, but I said it in unfortunate way.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's hard to dig it out of them. Sometimes they don't even know it, but it's true. It's hard to express yourself, but not just for directors, for any kind of people. So it's a hard thing.
Yeah. Daysha.
I think earlier in my career, I made mistakes like kind of similar to what Rodrigo was saying, was like you're working on a sequence and you get a note from the director or producer in the room, and you change it, but then you didn't duplicate your sequence. So like when they want to go back, you're sitting there hitting undo for 30 minutes, like trying to get all the way back to where, and then you can't always get there. So I think earlier in my career it was things like that, and also not being as prepared as I should be. I think like in the beginning, because sometimes they'll go and shoot a scene, and it won't be as scripted, but they still wanted you to cut it as scripted. They just shot it this way because it was convenient, or the set, the setups, the timing, everything like worked out for them to get the shot. So they just shot it that way. And I think when I was, at first coming out, I was just cutting it the way they shot it, and not having that option prepared and ready for the way it was scripted. So there's things like that. I mean, on television shows, you could end up working with 3 different directors. You only get 2 days with them. You don't always get communication from set about what the intention was, right? So I think I just kind of learned to reach out, get that clarification, stay in communication with everyone while they're on set. And for me, I learned that I absolutely have to look at all the footage in the dailies. I have to go through everything. I have to watch everything down, sometimes twice, so that if asked anything, I know exactly where it is. I've seen it. I'm never surprised by didn't we get a take where it was like this? Like, I'm like, yes, you did, and I have it, over here. So I think that was my biggest takeaway very, very early on in my career.
Yeah, that's a good one. Nicholas, how about you?
I think there's I mean, everything you're saying rings true to a job or another, where those were all definitely factors. And I'm still learning that stuff all the time, probably on every job, because especially when you work with a new person, it's a whole new relationship or a new team. And it's a huge thing, but I think it's something I still am dealing with, and I've definitely noticed when I've messed it up. But I think because early on I working on more things where maybe for whatever reason, the director or really creative producer wasn't always able to be in every room, like when you're spotting the music or when you're spotting the sound or when you're recording the ADR or you're recording the loop group stuff. All those times when occasionally you're asked to kind of step in to be the one who helps make sure you get the material that you need. And you're coming from often at the end of an edit being in a room for months with these people where you've really been the receptacle for all their ideas. No one document contains all the stuff about why they want that line there and that line gone or whatever. And so the mistake I've made often comes from the pressure from that. And because there's always an increasing time pressure, like feels like we have less and less time every job for things. And so the mistake I've made is often to get too attached to the offline versions of things that we have spent months auditioning and tweaking of that exact music edit or that exact sound transition style or that exact dialogue edit placement, or even temp graphics or things that, we've had all this time to work on. And then you're suddenly working with a new team member. And I've had to learn a number of times that yes, it's a hard thing to negotiate, that I do have to make sure that when I'm the one who knows something and I'm in the room, I'm conveying it, but I'm also not trying to control the input of a new collaborator and shutting down any of that input. And I've been rightly critiqued by directors for being like, okay, like you can you can step back. You don't have to worry so much about that. Like, yes, I liked what we did in the edit and it's good and we have that, but I'm also curious what they do without knowing all that stuff. And the answer to that is actually a weird one, because I think part of it is just like better listening and realizing like you set the tone a lot, especially on a feature, for how the whole team works together as the editor. But then also just work-life balance is a huge thing, because I'm so aware that when I haven't been respecting or taking care of other things and a movie is taken over, that's when I get the most, that's when I can potentially become the most control freaky about the finishing and how it's going, because it's everything for me at that moment, is the movie at that moment. And the passion's good, but the inability, the inflexibility is not good. So yeah, that's probably.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I haven't had many occasions of working on a film where we would have, like, temp things, but in the last short film that I did, we actually did have those. And yeah, when we got to the point where we had like the right version, it somehow like didn't feel as if that's what I wanted to be there, because I got used to the version that we had for so long, right? Yeah, so I can relate with that. And by the way, it's very good that none of you have any like fuck ups basically in the edit suit, because like I'll give you an example. I talked to Francis Parker. She edited Band of Brothers, right? And for Steven Spielberg, and she told me the story how Steven was coming to the edit suit one day, and she was about to meet him for the first time, and she had like action sequence from Band of Brothers, right, ready for him, and then like few minutes before he entered, I don't know, something went wrong, and she had the sequence off sync, right? Everything was off sync, right? And then he comes in, and she's like super stressed and so on. But I don't know, she just killed it. Like he watched it, she just like told him like, sorry, it's out of sync. I will fix it right away, but right now it's out of sync. But he just wanted to see it right away. He watched it and he said that she's great and he loves it. But so it ended well for her. But I just can't imagine how stressful that must have been.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I feel like. Yeah. I feel like I stored up a lot of early mess up embarrassment from screw ups in film school and stuff, where it motivated me to be insanely detail oriented once I was getting paid. But yeah.
Yeah. It's not like it doesn't happen. I might have just trauma blocked it out and I don't remember it. I don't want to.
Just try to forget. It happens.
It's better to forget.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the second job I ever assistant edited, I definitely accidentally deleted the LUT that the DP had created. And back then, like, there was no way to get it back. And I had to own up to that one. That was a long time ago.
That's a good one.
I'm pretty sure I sent a really personal email meant for someone else to my director on my first job. And he was such a nice, he was after being up all night working or something, and he was very understanding about it. But yeah.
There, now I get juicy stuff out of you. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second question is a little bit more technical, I guess, but I'm just curious because like the last time I asked about like the approach to creating like select reels, things like that, but another thing that I'm very curious about is the choice of a shot size, basically. So let's say you have like a full coverage, right? And you're rough cutting a scene, and I'm just curious, what's your approach when choosing, what sizes of the shot you will use to, tell the story throughout the scene? Yeah, there are films that are like push it to limits. For example, like a small feature that Simon Smith edited some time ago about a pandemic, actually COVID-19 pandemic in the UK, titled "Help." Uses like close-ups from the very beginning. Like it uses close-ups almost throughout the film, right? But like generally that doesn't work this way. So I'm curious, what's your approach when you have full coverage? How do you tackle that? Yeah, and once again, we'll go from Nicholas this time.
I mean, I think about things like this a lot in terms of like, okay, can I start to generalize and come up with rules that will help me, or for discussing with other people and comparing notes. But the truth is, job to job, it's so different, project to project, and I guess that means I'm always looking for ways to really, I mean, based on being an audience member of things, like I think I tune out or am less engaged in things that where I can't sense the intention behind these choices. And so I think I'm always looking to early on with conversations with the filmmakers or from my own read of the material or from early cuts I give them or seeing how they shoot the first few scenes and dailies that I get to figure out what kind of intentionality we can give to these choices early. So if it's a scene, sometimes the answer is dead obvious because you can just tell from the dailies that like all the love on the shoot day went into the close up. The other ones, they only did 3 takes. They never got the performance right. They really dialed in the performance or the close up, and there's just no question that the performance in a certain kind of scene has to lead. Because to do otherwise would tell you when you're viewing it that the intention is that like that the performance is not that important here. It's more about the frame. It's more about the rhythm. It's more about something like that. So I guess I'm always looking for the logic behind the choice first before I try and apply my own logic to that. And try to be bold early with those choices to find those answers, because I'd rather send 3 cuts that they go, no, 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 not at all, than 3 that they're like, all right, that'll be fine for now. Because I learned so much from those failed experiments where I'm like, hey, I didn't use any of your coverage. I just stayed in the wide the whole time because it seemed like a really powerful way to convey this idea. And they could be like that thought, but not right for that scene. And then we move on. And hopefully by the end, there's some kind of consistent logic that emerges from the edit, and those choices. But yeah, I can't say I have a rule for that.
Yeah. Cool. Actually, I totally agree with that. Yeah, Daysha, how about you?
I mean, that was a really great answer. I don't.
It was.
I'm
It was. I
supposed to
agree.
follow that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I usually start a scene at the end and work backwards. Or not even necessarily the end, but where I think the scene is about. It's like what is this specific scene about? And I give the most love and attention to that moment, and then I'll go and build the scene around it. So that might be, the big thing about this scene is the close up, and so I'll start there and build around that, knowing that I'm building to a close up that's really powerful. So I won't use it until I get there, because sometimes, like Nicholas said, it's not a rule, but sometimes it is more powerful to hold on to that close up until that a very important, impactful moment. The same thing with sound, right? Sometimes it's more important to just have the scene just incredibly quiet, and so that when the sound kicks in, it's even more impactful, and it feels important, it feels intentional. So I think that it's the same with shot sizes for me. If I'm trying to reveal the scope and scale of a room that someone's walking into, I won't show it to you right away. I'll wait until the perfect moment to cut to that wide, as the character is seeing it. Sometimes maybe you don't see it until the character is seeing it. So it's all based on the story, based on the scene, and the intention of that particular scene. I love staying tight and then revealing a moment. I love doing that, but not every scene calls for that. The beginning of I Want to Dance with Somebody is that you just kind of build on these tight shots where people are getting ready and you don't see Whitney right away, and you don't see her until we flash back. But that was something that we created. It wasn't scripted that way. It was something me and Casey created when we decided we needed a new opening to the film, and so that was totally about shot selection, size selection, And a lot of those shots I used were before they called action and after they called cut, because they didn't actually shoot it that way. It was just something we were building. But knowing that all the shot sizes kind of had to be tight, so you could, but then there's all this other shot from behind the stage where you want to see how big it is, how many people are in that room, so that you can feel how intense it is. And then you go out on her and it's really tight, so that I feel like I'm with her. It's all like, it's complicated. I mean, you know, what we do is so complicated, but it's all just case by case, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. But I love that you mentioned that. Like, I've heard some editors like saying that like they build a scene starting from the end, or as you said, from like the, you know, the moment of
From the
transformation
moment, yeah.
in the scene, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I love that because. Yeah. I don't know. Like initial idea for most editors is to start things chronologically. So it's nice that that idea of like, you know, making those decisions first on the most important moment in the scene. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rodrigo, how about you? Do you have some you know, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that-
think I think it's the same, similar. Like you have to think when it's a scripted thing, like how character is feeling and what you want to pass to the audience. So it could be something more if you want to have a close up, not just if it's an important moment, but what you want to translate with a close up. Sometimes something they're feeling, or sometimes wide shots will translate it better if you want them to pass something like they're lonely or in a crowded place. So I think it depends on what the intention is. It's more not just the intention when they shot, but the script intention or the performance. Because obviously, like Nicholas was saying, sometimes if you have a performance that is better in a close-up, you got to do it from there. Like, have to build the scene around that. Like Daysha was saying, but it depends. If you can move things around, it's good to choose something to translate what they're feeling to. But like in documentaries, because that's what I've done a lot of script in the past, but now I'm doing mostly documentaries, and that's a different thing because you usually don't have that option for you. Sometimes
Yeah.
you do. Sometimes people are shooting like two cameras, but usually you don't. And like you're saying, what I tend to when I'm looking through the footage, I choose like, okay, this is the moment that I want to have in the film. I think I explained to you that in when we talked, but like, and I have that moment there, and then I'm gonna build the rest around it. Sometimes the scene, sometimes the whole movie, and and I think that will dictate sometimes the shots you're gonna need. Because okay, to go from this, I'm gonna need a wide shot, and then I have to construct it a bit because documentaries that it is like something real, but it's also very constructed in a sense of editing. So it's important to know what you want to keep because you usually won't have a different camera for that. So I need this shot. So what's gonna come around it to make this land in the right moment? And it's like a puzzle. So it's good. It's a very different way
Mhm.
to from the scripted. I like both.
Yeah, that's for sure. And yeah. You
Yeah.
don't have the coverage options, so that in a
Sometimes you
way
do.
it's
Yeah.
yes, okay, I get it. I get it. Sometimes you do, but in general, like yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit different these days, right? But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Or it's a very simple option. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if simple is the right word, but
Yeah, no, yeah, I meant in the sense that you usually don't have a
yeah,
team like with different cameras or shooting something like in a
yeah,
medium
that's true.
and close up.
Exactly.
It's just like one or two, and that's it.
Yeah.
Cool. Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think these answers are all great. I don't have that much more to add beyond this. I think that one thing that often plays into this for me is also just wondering like whose scene is it and whose
Mm-hmm.
subjectivity am I trying to be aligned with? And sometimes what best aligns the audience with one character's subjective experience in that situation is very different from what you might expect. And so I think that generally questions of shot size have to do with how the character is perceiving things within that scene and trying to evoke that as much as possible through the precise sequencing of shot sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alex, do you have something to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say actually a similar thing to what Daniel said. I think it's
Hmm.
all about the perspective of just like whose perspective is the scene from? Is it from multiple perspectives? Does it switch in the middle of the scene? Um, and I know like on Appendage, there's like a perspective switch that happens in the film, and we wanted to make sure that that character's perspective was being captured throughout the film, so that when it eventually did switch, like it didn't feel like too jarring. So sometimes it's about remembering things like that as a reason to cut to that character. But even like in terms of like building, since it was a horror film, I think in terms of building scares, kind of what you were saying, Daysha, with like when do you reveal the wide? Like there's a moment in Appendage where the lead character gets home and she's like had some stuff to drink and she's having an anxiety attack, and there's a shot of a couch, like kind of a wide that reveals her room and the couch. And I think when I first saw that shot, I was like, why is that shot in the movie? I don't know what we can do with that. And then eventually it was about realizing, oh no, like this is what she's seeing. And then so then when you cut to it and she's staring at it, it's scary. You don't know what's under the couch.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's sort of creating this sort of like this moment of you're seeing what she's seeing. So yeah, I think it's just, it's all about the perspective as much as possible.
Perspective.
I worked on a thing where the cinematographer did not like to shoot traditional close-ups. He was not into that, and we we tried to honor that as much as possible originally, but then we screened it. We did a test screening, and the audience could not connect to the character like at all. Like they're just like this is fun, but I don't understand. Like, I don't know who I care about in this. And so we had to go in, and I had to create different sizes in post, which is like sometimes great.
Basically blowing up the shots.
Yes. And just in particular moments where you felt like you needed a close up in order to feel like you were with the protagonist, like feel like you were on sort of on this journey with them. But if you're constantly back here or from this sort of like bird's eye view of storytelling, then the audience doesn't really connect. And it's not throughout the whole thing. Like there are just moments where you need to feel what that person is feeling, what that character is feeling. And sometimes you just need to be closer. So it can be just trial and error of that as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah, it's always, I don't know, it's always something that feels a little bit interesting to me when I'm dealing with something new. So thank you. I want to move on to the third question, which actually touches on something that Alex has mentioned, work-life balance, right? Was it Alex? I think it was Alex, right?
Or that was Nicholas, I think.
Nicholas.
Sorry, it was Nicholas. So Nicholas, you mentioned work-life balance. I want to talk about that. A friend of mine, Zach Arnold, he actually uses the term work-life presence instead, because like he says it's like it shouldn't be about like balance thing. It should be more about presence, right? When you're like off work, you're off work, right? When you're doing work, you're 100% working, right, and giving your attention to something else, right? So my question is, how do you deal with that like work-life presence thing? What do you do? And maybe let's frame it this way: what do you do? What are you trying, or what are you planning to do to improve that aspect of your work and the life? And I will start with Alex, because Alex actually has a very interesting perspective, I think, because the director of Appendage, Anna Zlokovic, is his wife, right? So
Yes.
all best to Anna, and and Alex, I want to hear how it works for you guys.
For sure. I mean, it's tough when everything becomes about the movie, especially when you're married to the director. It can be very easily like, everything is the movie. You sit down to dinner and it's like, how can we not talk about the movie tonight? But it's kind of a fun balance for us, and I think we do a good job. It's not perfect, but we do a good job at balancing that and trying to do other things. I think something both of us like doing, especially in post, is just taking a lot of walks throughout the day. We live in a really nice neighborhood, and I think, for a while it's really been difficult for me, but I think I've finally come around to just know that if I step away, like, it's going to be okay, like the project will eventually get done. The scene will get figured out. It's probably better for me to step away and go on a walk than to not. I think sometimes I used to get just obsessed about, like, I'm just going to sit here all day and, just not do anything and barely eat and just, try and finish this thing. And, when I went to, we filmed Appendage in North Carolina, and we brought our dog with us. And so I had the dog with me in the bus. And so it was really nice because I got to walk the dog like 4 or 5 times a day. And it was just a great break from being like just so everything. And so I think the main thing is just knowing that it's going to be okay. Like, I just have some type of faith in myself now that it will get figured out. And, I found that I haven't even crazy hours all the time like I used to when I was younger. Maybe because I feel like the time I'm actually spending working is like much more efficient. But yeah, that's kind of how it's been. And it's always a struggle. Good. And I hopefully get better at taking breaks and, also giving some time in the morning, do a quick meditation in the morning, do a stretch, do things for yourself. I found like cook breakfast if I'm, if you're, at home, or things like that can be really healing and nice.
Yeah, exactly. Daniel, how about you? What do you do to improve that aspect?
Oh, it's definitely something that I struggle with. Yeah, if anybody has this totally figured out, be sure to let me know. But it's definitely tough. I don't feel like I work quite as long hours as I used to. And I think part of it was just realizing that was unsustainable. I think I might have felt earlier on in my career like, okay, if I don't know when the next project is coming, I can tolerate this for a while. But then for the past few years, there haven't been that long periods when I've not been working. And so I've sort of realized if I'm working really long days, I'm just not going to have an enjoyable life ever at this rate. So I'd better get used to working at a pace that I actually think is sustainable if I don't have regular breaks built into my schedule. So I've been trying to maintain some boundaries around work in that sense. And I think part of it is also just working with people who are generally pretty reasonable and trusting, and people who understand that the changes that you make between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. are probably not going to make or break the film, even if you feel like it's actually, important to convince somebody. Like if you're showing a cut to the producers, for instance, I agree it's best to put your best foot forward, but I think that more bad decisions have been made between midnight and 4 in my life than good ones. So generally, I just feel much more confident in hitting a deadline when I've put my pencil down at like 5 p.m. and I've been like, okay, does everything here look okay? Can I confidently say, this is the cut that I want to share with people? And if I'm well rested and I can say yes, that just feels so much better.
Yeah, that's so good. And by the way, I don't think anyone has it like figured out like 100%. It is a struggle. Like I think it's the only thing we can do is actually like accept that it is a struggle and it will be a struggle, and only like try to improve it, right? With every job, I guess. Rodrigo, right. What do you plan to improve that aspect?
I think it's I don't know. I don't have a plan. So, but I think it's important for us to, because sometimes obviously schedule's fault or the producer or something, but sometimes it's our fault too. So I think it's like we're saying, like I wanted to do this, I wanted this to make the best thing, so keep working and doing something when you kind of should not. So I think it's important to remember that it's a job. It's not it's nothing beyond that. Obviously, we all have passions on what we're doing, but at the end of the day, it is a job. It's not your life. You're not defined only by that. So you have to remember that's the time to start, that's the time to end, and that's how jobs are, and that's what you're being paid for to do. Some things that would ground you more in the sense that that's what it is. Because being a creative job, it's sometimes you can mess things around and be very passionate and connected to what you're doing, because that's how you do a good job. It's like a good editing, a good work. That's how you do it. So it's hard not to be like that. But you have also to remember that sometimes you can be draining yourself, like while you're working, because it just won't be the same. It won't be as good. And I think it's a snowball effect. It's just going to get worse and worse, like Daniel was saying. So it's good to just respect boundaries. And I think when you respect your own boundaries, people start to respect them too. So if you're always there to do that extra stretch, people will always count on you to do that extra stretch. And when you don't do it, it will be worse than if you usually really try to stop. I'm not saying like, yeah, just quit, like go away, like from the other. Sometimes you can't, right? But usually in a normal Tuesday, you should just, I don't know, leave at the time you're supposed to.
No,
That's what I try to
love
do.
it. I
It's
think
not always...
that like
Yeah.
If you don't respect your time, no one will. Yes. So I mean that's a great one. Yeah. Daysha.
Oh, I'm really bad at that. I think I get like obsessed about the thing I'm working on, like truly obsessed. And I just did my first theatrical feature, and so I was even more obsessed about getting it right, you know? There are things every weekend I try to be like outside. I try to go hiking or at the beach, around nature, like fresh air, do something that is at least like physically healthy, or even on that film, I try to ask the crafty when they ask you like, what do you want stocked and stuff. I'm always like, we need fruits, we need like this is apples, bananas, like something, or like clementine, something we can just grab really easily and eat that isn't chocolate, but also. But also chocolate. But also chocolate. But yeah, no, I was like, can we get pressed juicery? Like just like things that are easy, because when we're like in that room, we are not going to come out. Like I know me, and I'm like, I know if it's something that I could just grab really easily that is at least conducive to that part of your health, you know what I mean? But I'm really bad. I think I was grinding so hard at the beginning of my career that I was just racking up credits and constantly working, and no hiatus, no break, just go. And I think as I get older, I'm very much like, no, like, this is the only life we get. This is it. We don't get it. This is it. We're here, and you can spend all of that time, the entire year, working, and though it is your passion and it's something that you love to do and you enjoy it, you are missing out on a lot of other parts and aspects of life if you don't try to balance it. I don't think there is a balance. I think I agree with what your friend was saying, Piotr. Like I have had that advice as well, that when you're at work, you have to be at work, and then when you're with your family, you have to put work down so that you can give your full attention to your family and experience that part of life. As soon as I get a break now, I buy a flight somewhere, because I'm just like, I can keep saying I want to go see Italy. I want to go see this, and then never go because I just take a job. And the only way you actually get to travel as an editor is to just buy the damn ticket. You just and then like try to build around that vacation, because otherwise you'll never take a vacation. So I think that's what I've been trying to do. Definitely a work in progress. So I'm eating breakfast now as we're speaking. Like I'm not good at this, but definitely I'm trying.
It's also important to know your limits. So I guess that's good, right?
Yes.
And you just have an item on your to-do list, like right, buy the ticket to Italy or whatever. So,
Yeah, just do it. You gotta just do it. Yeah.
Nicholas.
Yeah, everything everybody said, and I think it's so great to have these these talks with people who are in very much the same boat, because just hearing other people who are clearly very good at their jobs and successful saying, I do try to keep this balance, is a good reinforcement, because I think I had a lot of early reinforcement on myself growing up from school and then from early jobs of like, wow, we really love you because you just don't stop working. Like, and how much that and the enforcement you attach why you're good at your job to never putting anything above it, or and that and yeah, saying like, I know I'm happier if I leave here at 7:30 and I go home and I go to the gym, then I cook dinner, and if I do that, generally I know I'm happier, and I know also part of it comes from experience that you can look at where you're at and you can be like, yeah, it would be great if I made it through this reel, but I'm not gonna do that, and it will also be absolutely fine if I don't, because there is still time. And then you choose your battles. There are the weeks and the projects that are particularly important to you that you do it. And but if you have something left in the tank, you can actually do that. So that's the general part and the psychological part. Practically everything you're all saying is, I think dogs are probably like great for getting you out of the room. The thing I always tell myself with vacations is, as soon as they give you a post calendar with an end date, book your ticket, because they will keep extending it, and the other job will ask you to overlap. So yeah there's those things. And stretching, that's also yeah. As a 42-year-old, stretching is like the number one thing now for me. So, yeah.
I gotta get on that.
It's important, we're sitting all day, or I have a standing desk, but I never use it. I just sit, even though I should be standing, and it's like, gotta do something,
Yeah. Whenever I watch like something Walter Murch related, then I will stand more for a few days, but then I sit more.
Exactly.
Well, if you're in the union, you get a certain amount of physical therapy visits covered by your insurance. I recommend everybody go even before they have really anything bad. They can, just because they'll just be like, you are totally hunched over most of the, and you just, early corrections are better than late emergencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not to get so real, but yeah.
Gotta sign up for that.
Yeah. I stand like half of the day. I have a standing desk, and like the morning time when I feel like I have some energy, I stand, and then I have like a floor mat to keep me from like buckling. The floor mat's really helpful, especially like on the hips and the knees. But around 3:00, I'm in the chair. Can't do it. Can't do it all day.
Also use like I don't know, like some kind of like cushions, or like basically things that you can put under your feet, but not only like a mat, but also something that like, I don't know, like an object that you can roll with your feet or something like that. I heard that is pretty good as well. I do use it sometimes. I have like a I don't know how to call it, but basically this rolling thing for your muscles. So I will just sometimes put it under my feet. But yeah, I don't know. I used to use standing desk much more when I bought it, but these days I use it much less.
All those tools are great, but they can't replace leaving your desk more often.
Exactly.
You have to do some things, but yeah.
Yeah, You have to worry about the people who have those like bikes under their desks.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm a little worried about those people. It's just like, just go walk, just go outside. Yeah.
And Nicholas, you've mentioned that aspect of like, like being rewarded for working too much early on, right, in your career. And I'm sure all of you have seen it. Like Paul Rogers, his like response to winning an Oscar, and he was interviewed, and he told like that there is like a glorification in Hollywood of like working long hours and so on, right? Which is like something that people shouldn't. Yeah. Anyway, it's good to have that conversation, I guess. So that's why I wanted to talk with you about that question. We're moving on to the second part, which basically is like a freestyle conversation between all of us, right? So if you guys have questions to others, I do, so I can start. Then go ahead, and there is no structure for the next like 30 minutes, and then we'll follow it with the Q&A. So if there is anyone who has a question, just write it in the comments, or if you're on the Riverside in the audience, then you can wait for your turn and ask a question when we start that last section. So does anyone want to start, or do you want me to I don't know, maybe someone has like
I have a question
to someone. Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm curious, like so on Appendage, we didn't have the time or the money to test the film. We just like kind of sent out some private links to people and got feedback. Sometimes we'll Zoom and talk to them and get their kind of feedback. But I'm curious, like what you guys do. Are you guys showing scenes to your family members, to your friends? Are you just relying on producers? Do you rely on test screenings? Like, I'm just so curious what everybody does to know if something's working, especially like Nicholas with Nope, like there's like jump scares and very effective jump scares. And, how do you know if stuff like that's working? Just curious.
I can start real quickly, just since you mentioned Nope. I think for me, it's like, again, project, try and early. If I don't know the filmmaker yet, I'll try and like get some good, not like demanding, but just, thorough conversations about our approaches to these things and our experiences with these things, so that, and I can advocate. So for me, I maybe because I started with like art film and video art, and then like music videos and documentaries, but then very early when I started getting more actual paid work, it was like documentary and comedy. And so very early comedy became like, it was like so obvious that the version you come up with on your own in a room, or even two people in a room, is so different than how it feels watching it with other people. And so I think that showed me pretty early on that there is a value to it, where I think, there can be the flip side opinion, which is like, that's selling out if you're like market testing, focus testing your work. I think it's all in the interpretation of that and what kind of questions you ask of people. So, and who you actually care, how much you actually care as a filmmaker, or your filmmakers you're working with care what anyone else thinks of it. Because, with comedy or with horror, or actually with anything, if it works for you, that's valuable, because probably the most valuable thing, or you being the director or the filmmaker, if it's working for them, then that should give you like 90% of what you need. But then there is some element that's like, you do lose some objectivity about, you care about that character because you wrote it, you've been inside their head, but now that you're outside of their head and watching it, how much is that coming across to the audience? So, I think it's all about the interpretation of it. And it's like with studio notes or notes from people coming at it as more of a viewer, you have to look for the spirit behind why people are reacting to things and think about, is that something you want or not? And with something like Nope or Us, there's a lot of mystery in those movies, that there are very good questions and good confusions people have watching it that are very much the intent of Jordan when he's making them. That's the stuff he wants people to be debating and talking about after. don't want to answer that. But then there are other questions where people could be like, well, why did he do that? And that's not one that he's interested in. So that's the kind of thing where you just have to weigh and find the spirit behind people's notes. And I think it can be very valuable as long as you don't start people don't start taking the control away from the filmmaker with that.
Right.
With those responses. And it's a political thing for the producer and the director to decide, do they even want to open up to that? So,
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, test screenings can be like really fun or the worst time of your life. Like I had never done one in like full. I think when I went to dance with somebody, we over tested it like 4 times. It was insane. But there was such and there was also too many producers on the film. It was a lot happening on that movie. But it was about like, I can hear and feel in a theater with a group of people who are blind going, they didn't even know what movie they were going to go see. They got there. And I can, they're getting chills at this moment, and that's working, I was at a test. We did one of the test screenings. There was like this transition to "I Will Always Love You," and someone yelled out "Icon," like this screamed "Icon" like that. And I was like, okay, so that moment's probably working. But then there's always going to be, like Nicholas said, the questions that come up that you definitely want to get answered, and then in those moments, a test screening is helpful. I think when I'm, working from home and cutting a scene, I'll like ask my girlfriend to come watch the scene. Like, don't tell her what it is. It's like, hey, can you come watch this? And then she's crying at the end. She's like, why did you do that to me? And she's like, walk out. I'm like, okay, great. That scene's working. That scene's working. But I feel like if you don't get some sort of feedback and you are kind of just like in this like tunnel with you and the director, and you guys know it works, then you might end up losing the audience in places and you don't necessarily know it. But I do feel like there's like kind of the politics of what Nicholas was talking about. It could just be overdone, and we start to get so worried about every little thing that an audience was asking for that it starts to take away from the vision that we were trying to create in the first place. And I'm like, yes, maybe they didn't get exactly, not every single person in there they're completely different people. They don't even know each other. It's like, yeah, of course they didn't all get exactly what they wanted out of this. But if it's working overall, then we should keep pushing in sort of the artistic direction that we were going for. And we don't want to lose that, right? Like, it's something, I was going to ask Nicholas what the test screenings for us were like, because I can only imagine they were insane.
They were, well, so I'm trying to edit my answer so I don't talk about it, because I have a lot of thoughts about this, because from comedy and from horror and then from more experimental and drama things, such different calculations. And
Yeah.
Totally.
all the time, like the sort of internal screenings, like you were asking about, like friends and family or other filmmakers, again, I think like those are super valuable too. If it were me, purely up to me, I would have basically an open door on the edit room, because I can filter when somebody is saying like, I don't get that, and I'm like, yeah, that's okay, don't worry about that. Or when it's something that like, wait, really, you didn't so with like okay, 3 really quick stories. One was my first focus testing on a feature was a comedy, and it got really a lot. So I think the conversation is really valuable. You're in the room, you hear the people laughing, you just read the feeling. That's really valuable. And then you hear them discuss it after. That's really valuable. By the time you get to those breakdown sheets, I think you're delving into like an attempt to do something weird. And that movie got really more, they were like, well, what's interesting is you got more excellence than we were expecting, but less goods than we were expecting. So for the goal for the next cut is to get less excellence and more goods, because they would rather more people would like it a bit than a few people it's their favorite movie. But anyway, that's where it gets gross. And then also on TV, I did one TV pilot where they do a live dial as they watch it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a scene where the main character goes through a really dark, like a torture scene, which motivates why they do everything else in the story. And of course, everybody when they're watching torture just goes bad, bad. I don't like it. I don't like it. And so the studio is like, we might need to cut that scene. It's like, no, please. You understand? That's a human reaction to the character you like going through something bad. That isn't, I don't like the filmmaking. So anyway, and then with us, I think with us was really valuable because the production design, the script had the underground world described one way. By the time they went through everything of this building the sets, doing all the set dressing and all of that, it went a different way. And then audiences had a kind of reaction to that led me just noticed they kept having a lot of questions about what that thing is and why that weren't really on the docket for the top kinds of things we want people to be wondering about necessarily. So that influenced how Jordan then went back for pickups and a few extra pieces. They were small, but they just nudged it back to sort of flesh the world out, and the thing with Jordan that's so cool is, I mean, he's sort of built in the idea of pickups to his movies. From Get Out, they reshot the ending, to Us, and there was like a lot more added, and same with Nope. So it's sort of like we know from the beginning we're going to go shoot, we're going to cut, then we're going to show people, and then we're going to go shoot some more with that info. So it isn't like a bad thing to get that feedback. It's sort of a necessary part of it. But anyway, that was a lot. Sorry.
That's
Great
so cool.
stories. Very, very educational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Super captivating. Daniel, did you have screenings on how to blow up a pop?
Yeah, we did have some. We didn't really have like official test screenings with a big audience. It was mostly friends and family, and we would often try to get people who are outside of our immediate circle of friends. So it'd be like, hey, more distant friend, can you also bring your other friend we don't know? And that was really helpful, just to get people who weren't going to be really nice to us just because they knew us. And a lot of these screenings weren't in like very controlled environments, but I found it very helpful. I think Daniel, the director, really likes having test screenings and really likes knowing how things are working for different people, and he loves to just like interrogate audience members after screenings, which is often very useful. I find it very helpful just to get many people's different reads on things, but of course it's kind of a love-hate relationship. Like, I want the feedback, I need the outside perspective, I don't totally trust myself, and yet I also just want everybody to like everything all the time. So you know, I don't really want to hear what's not working, but also I know that I need to hear it. I find it very difficult to do anything comedic without having a test audience, and that was something that was very difficult during the pandemic. I worked on a comedy called The Drop that was, I had a lot of fun working on that, but it was tough because we never actually got a live audience in a space. So the director and I would have to just try to be as fresh as possible and try to drag, like, you know, a friend or a partner in or something to watch with us, just to like remember what it's like to laugh with somebody else while watching this stuff that at one point we found funny, but that by the end of the edit we were like, is this funny? I don't know. Could be really boring at this point. I don't know. But yeah, I guess one thing that I struggle with test screenings too is that even though I don't really like having all of the metrics like excellent versus good and trying to read too much into that data, I actually do find written responses very helpful, because people always give you their kind of unvarnished opinions before they're influenced by other members of the test audience. And a lot of the time when we've had these kind of talkbacks after a screening, there will be one voice or two voices who end up dominating the conversation, and sometimes they'll like implant thoughts into other audience members' heads that they didn't actually have while watching the film. Like, one audience member will say like, I was very confused by this moment, and then everybody else will be like, huh, I wasn't consciously thinking about that at the time, but come to think of it, if I go through and actually pick this apart, I don't really understand that thing. It's like, well, I actually want to know what was occurring to you organically, like before this guy over here said, I found this confusing.
That's
true. Like, people
can't say
right.
They say that this is like the disadvantage of like brain, because if you have like a large group to brainstorm something, usually the people that are like kind of like louder, they will actually conversation, and sometimes like, you know, like a box around ideas, and instead of having like a lot of, you know, perspectives they're trying to brainstorm, basically it limits to few people that are allowed to get their ideas through. So I guess that's like a similar thing. Yeah, I don't know. I find that you say that like you're very. I guess that's something that comes with experience that I just don't have. But you just mentioned that fact of like being able to filter through what's, if someone like coming in and says doesn't work for me or something like that, confusing, then and you're able to filter out what's like really an issue and what's really not, because like I don't see the full picture or whatever, right? I struggle with that a lot, and I don't know, it's a little bit different story, but I recently written a short film that I plan to shoot this year, but anyway, but I went through like the process of rewriting that short film a few times, and like everyone who gave me notes, like I'm super grateful, and the notes were great, but by the end of that process, like the first notes were gold, because like I knew right away what are the issues in the script, right? But in the later stages, it was very hard for me to filter through what's really important, and what's really like killing the vision that I have, right? So while I want to be respectful like that, it's also like there is a point where there is a balance, like, because like even people that are giving you the notes are not like really convinced, like they're not like, oh my goodness, you have to change that. They're more like, not sure if it's a blah blah blah, what I mean, right? It's not that like black and white thing anymore. And I don't know, like that filtering thing is kind of difficult for me sometimes, I think. So I guess that's something that comes with experience, my hope at least.
Or just like unearned confidence and bloated ego. No, I don't. I don't know. It's different on every project, because like the show I'm on right now, like we're not focus testing, and that was a relief, because none of us on the filmmaking team thought we needed to. Like the director and the producer thought like, no, like we know what we need to do. We've gotten good feedback from the other producing partners and the studio, that sort of confirmed and denied suspicions we had. But very much the concept of this film, I think, is like, this is a statement from an artist, this film. And when you go in to see, when that's the deal you're making with a movie, like I would rather see their statement than the thing that got whittled to be most agreeable to more people. It's going to be divisive. There's going to be people who are just like, I don't get it and don't like it. But that's sort of the deal on this one, and that's not true on other movies, where the whole point is to be part of some popular conversation. And if you're just speaking the language influently, and people can help you figure that out, that can only improve the communication of the thing you're doing. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, the notes, I mean, studio notes are very tricky, and you have to negotiate with, see how your directors and producers are handling that input. Because you can't just be like, see, they didn't get it either. I was right. We do need to put that at the beginning necessarily, because,
But you really want to, though.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes.
And it's all like you're saying, the studios, and I think one of the things that's happening a lot now, especially with streamers, since they have a lot of data for the things like how people are watching stuff and when they turn it off and how long this should be and what I should show or not. I fear that sometimes it starts to just turn everything like similar, so you can like get the biggest audience possible. And that's a problem if you're just following like the data and the algorithms and everything. You're just building a film or a series that starts gonna look like everything else. So it's important to try to separate. I think that's what you mean also with the test screenings. It's good to know if what you wanted to say with your piece is getting through people, if people are really understanding, and not necessarily like, I would prefer if this was like this. But no, this is this is a vision. It's not necessarily what the audience would prefer or not. It's more like, is the audience understanding the vision behind this, or is just not there? So we have to rework so the vision can pass through the audience. Sometimes it won't, and that's good. depending on the feature. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think it's more important than gathering like what people would like to see, because that's gonna everything's gonna look the same in 20 years. I don't know if we do that.
Yeah, that's the content versus art conversation. It's like
Yeah.
if you are just like churning out what these streaming services are calling content and not actual like artwork from someone who had a vision and is trying to tell you something,
Yeah.
then everything becomes a TikTok video, and it's
Mhm.
based on the views, based on this, based on that, and not how it felt to people when they were watching it.
Yeah.
It
And like
was
you're
it
saying
was
about the
interesting on
AI, people
oh.
can do it. Yeah. No,
Oh,
Julian,
yeah.
I think she
Right.
mentioned AI earlier. Like soon they just can do it all.
Yeah.
Well, they
Um,
have. I mean, it was a surprise to me on one movie I worked on. I won't mention which, but we on bigger studio movies, which I haven't done that many of. But the marketing is so heavily involved, and they actually get all the dailies the same time editorial does, straight from set. And we discovered that they had basically. I'm assuming it was an AI from how bad it was, but marketing basically as the shoot progressed automated edit based on the circle takes so they could kind of see what the movie was going to be well before we cut it. And I think
Holy
that's
crap.
standard in these marketing departments, but I was only one time did I actually see it and I couldn't believe it. Anyway, so yeah, it's happening already.
that's wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my god.
Wow. How did you see it? They offered it?
No, my genius assistant editor, Matt Absher, was like, they had just rolled out all these studios now have, we had Pix, which worked great for dailies. I mean, it worked pretty well. And then there was like Frame.io, but now I think all these studios want to cut themselves checks rather than some other company. So they're all starting their own dailies review programs, which are going through a lot of growing pains. But this was the first time they'd rolled it out, and I think they left a back door open in the like looking at cuts. And my assistant editor was like, "What's this folder?" and just found it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh no. That's incredible.
It's happening.
Slap in the face.
happening.
It's happening. Yeah.
That's it. They will all look the same. I don't think it's something. Just bringing like a different question already. I like to worry about AI. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I think it's not necessarily a big problem because the movies will all just look the same, and I don't think people will enjoy that as much. Because if you're just using data to try to measure something and make it work automatically, it's not going to be as artistically as other jobs made by a human being. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah.
I feel like AI
person-
is a good it's a good tool for you. Maybe it can generate ideas or I've used it to help me write After Effects scripts and things like that, and it's a very nice like buddy to have. But I would be more worried. This is going to sound kind of aggro, but I would be more worried about a marketing department being like thwarted from AI than an actual like editor or any department head or writer director. Because I feel like that kind of stuff can be a bit more maybe automated. I don't know. But I don't know. Even that, there's an art to it, I don't know. I just don't know. I do worry about like assistant editors and AI taking a lot of their positions or their sort of things away. I think you'll always need an assistant to, like I'm working on something right now where like a full day like wasn't even slated because they were running behind and all these things. And you can't really, you need a human there to communicate and be like, well, what scene is this and all that stuff. But I do think that it could definitely help with a lot of the legwork in terms of syncing and logging. And I mean, transcribing, I use it for Adobe's, transcribing tools uses AI, and I use it and it's amazing. It makes everything super easy to find a line. So, maybe it's short-sighted, but that's how I feel about it now. Hopefully it doesn't get too good at editing.
I mean, personally, I think that it's gonna be better, and it's gonna be probably better to the extent where it's scary at some point at least. And I don't know, even like talking to Walter Murch about it, because I did ask him about this aspect when I interviewed him a few months ago, and he seems to be worried about AI, and he said to me something like, "I'm glad that I worked when I did." So I think the future is a little bit scary, but at the same time, I just think that people like to connect with other people. And like, for example, music, I don't know if it's a good example, but I think like, creating like, I don't know, some kind of, like music could be automated for a long time, I think, to some extent at least. Creation of music, themes or songs or whatever, right? But still, it doesn't stop the inflow of new artists, because people want to have other people to connect with, to relate with, and so on. And my hope is that directors, writers, editors are still those people that people want to connect with and want to have that interaction. And while there is actually, I don't think I have doubt that there will be like huge consequences to the industry. I still think that we're gonna adapt, basically. We're gonna adapt, and it's not gonna, it doesn't threaten, like, for storytellers, it doesn't threaten them directly, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I do think that there are all kinds of creative decisions that can only be made by real humans, and ultimately, what inspires the most, I don't know, like admiration in audience members is very often the stuff that's so idiosyncratic and human in ways that could never be imagined by a machine. Like imagine an AI trying to make like a David Lynch film or something. Just it wouldn't really work. Or it would not seem intentional at the very least. But I do think that, to Alex's point too, I think that what is scarier is the idea that it might be harder to have a sustainable career as somebody who, starts as an assistant and then works their way up into the higher echelons. Like, how do you get from just starting out to being an established editor working on projects that are really creatively rewarding if a lot of that labor has been outsourced to an AI? And so I guess I would just worry that already. It is hard enough already. And I would just worry that in particular that would just disadvantage people who already have the hardest time getting into the industry, people who don't have connections, or who come from backgrounds that are just less represented in post-production more generally. So how do you ensure that there's a sustainable future for everybody who's trying to start out?
Right.
We're moving closer to the last part, to the Q&A, but I just want to ask about two things. First of all, about I don't know, networking aspect of, like, maybe networking is not the best word for that, but guys, like, basically, how do you connect with other people in the industry, especially like finding new connections? How do you is it something that you like think about on a regular basis, on how to connect with someone that you love someone's work, and you do something to try to build that relationship and that connection line with them? So yeah, I want to start with that question.
I mean, I know that I know that I have to kind of program myself to sort of check in, not let too long go by that I haven't really kind of checked in and thought about what kinds of things would I like to be working on if I really could work on anything, to watch things like that, to see who are making the things like that at any given moment, and then when and if I am in a conversation that's come around with meeting somebody, like, either I'll try and go to screenings with the Q&As and things, or I'll try and, but based less on career like in terms of just like the money part, although that's obviously real and we have to, but also just on like things I'm actually interested in, finding people who are interested in similar things. And I'm also just I'm such a huge advocate of just the cold contact, reaching out. I think I've almost never gotten an email from somebody being like, "Hey, just wanted to say, thought this was great, good work," that I was like, block, don't do that. I'm always happy, even whether anything comes out of it or not. So I tend to think most people are too, probably. So, yeah, and then, and I try not to be too passive about, since I've worked with an agent, to just be like, what do you guys have for me? Because obviously they have their own agenda that might not line up exactly with what I would like to be working on. So, but it's tricky. It's hard because we are all in rooms on our own so much of the time. But I'm working on a show. I live in LA, but this movie is in New York, and I wanted to come do this because it's a different group of people in the sound, in the post producing. There's other producers I haven't worked with before. So, but this came after years ago. I had a general meeting with the person who runs this production company that's making this movie. So it took years for anything to happen from that general meeting. But I'm glad I did.
Yeah, my career kind of started and scripted from general meetings and just telling everyone I saw or spoke to that I wanted to get out of reality TV and start doing scripted television and try to get into film. So I had to be sort of my own advocate at first and just, go out and be very vocal about it so that anybody I met, if something came up that they thought I would be good for, they knew to think of me. It's all usually like through some sort of personal connection. And if you don't have that personal connection, then you have to kind of go out and meet new people. I got, everybody kind of gets into the industry different. Our paths are all different. No one kind of like got in the exact same way. I think people, especially assistant editors, tend to think, oh, I have to do this to get my hours, and then I can get in the union, and then I can do this, and then like they're, the steps sort of thing. But I just applied to work on a reality show, and I got it. Like I just put in my resume on the computer, and I got the interview. And it was unheard of to a lot of people. But then, once you get in there, it's about what you do when you get in there. You just need to get in the room. You need to, meet as many people as possible when you're in the room and show that you're somebody that they want to work with again. And not just because of your talent, but because of a lot of what we do is interfacing constantly with a few people, and communicating creatively what we're trying to express. Then people have to kind of like you because you spend a lot of time with them. So there's that part too. But I think that I got general meetings with people who worked at HBO that led to other general meetings that led to other general meetings that led to more general meetings, and it's just you don't know if it's going to lead anywhere. But similar to Nicholas, I ended up on the season 4 of Insecure, and I had met with the producer on that in season 1. It's like 3 years later, I ended up on the show. So it's like you never know who is going to end up where. I kind of like to network across, because like, yes, I could go like reach out for every producer and every director I've ever wanted to work with, but other editors, the PAs, like everybody's just as important to network with and kind of like build a sort of community of people who you like. And even post producers, like you never know where they're going to end up. And this is obviously in the television world, but you never know where they'll end up and think of you when they have their next project. So yeah. It's making a friend as an adult, which is awkward as hell. Like just like trying to make friends like over 25 is just weird. Like I feel like, but it's something that's like built into our career path. You just have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice way of framing it. Yeah. Just a reminder. So, if anyone has questions, especially people from the editing staff, you can call in. There is a button at the bottom to call in, and then you will have to describe your question very briefly because you will read it anyway once you're in. Yeah, and before we do that, if there will be anyone, we'll see. But I just want to ask, Alex, I want to ask you a question because Appendage was your first feature, right? Was it? I'm just making sure.
Our first
Yeah.
narrative feature.
First narrative feature.
narrative,
Sorry for
yeah.
that. Yeah. So my
Yeah.
question is, how was the experience different than you expected, basically, than you imagined? I haven't edited a feature myself. Yeah, so I'm just curious.
Totally. It was awesome. I really, I loved it. I've been wanting to do this forever. I've been wanting to do like a feature forever. And so it was, it was great. Anna and I have written a couple scripts together. And so I understand the pace, from that experience, I think I got the pace of like, okay, this is a marathon. I need to pace myself. And understanding how many scenes there are and all these trajectories and all these things. I think the writing together really, really helped me get into that world really well. But yeah, it was great. I think I was expecting it to feel like harder, or I mean, it was very difficult, but I think I think from like a logistical perspective, I just really planned the crap out of it in terms of, how we were uploading everything and making sure the assistant was going to be on time with everything. And, it was a very difficult process in terms of making the film. I was also a producer on the film. And so it was all kind of just like a meshed like production and post-production. And it was very quick. We locked the film in 7 weeks. And so because of the studio's timeline and budget, which was really fast, and so it all just kind of like was like a whirlwind of like, all right, like we're just, I just have to do this and I'll come out on the other side kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I'm addicted. This is all I want to do now. And yeah, it was great. I really, really enjoyed it a lot.
Amazing. By the way, it was very interesting to see the feature version after seeing the short film because they're so different in a lot of ways. So it was fascinating to me how that story transitioned into a feature-length movie. Respect to all of you because I love all of the movies that you edited. Yeah. Questions? Do we have questions? If there is anyone calling in, do it now. It's time to do it. We have a question from YouTube. Donat Tai asks, what can I do to transition into film projects and what kind of similarities, differences, or surprises has anyone had in this career? So I guess that he's probably mostly working in corporate world. So does anyone want to take that? It's a tough question.
Well,
I mean, Daysha actually touched on it last.
Daysha was exactly. No one's ever done it. Like I was never an assistant, but some people, like a lot of editors, I mean, did all those steps. So to me, I think, the shortest answer I can give is like, look at what people. If you're doing a low paid or no paid or early job with somebody, get a sense however you can from talking to them or what they're working on or what they say they want to work on, if they're gonna maybe keep going that direction too, because there is very little way to just go straight there unless you happen to just bond with somebody who gets a movie. But early on it was through doing favors, music videos, being just helping them, shooting things for people even, but them knowing I was an editor, that then after a year or 2 or 3 those people got the opportunity to look for an editor or have to tell somebody, oh, I know an editor. And so it took a while, and nobody will just nobody will just be like, you've never told me you want to do a feature, and you've never done one, but I think you can do it. Like that information has to be out there for them to already know, and that word to get around, I guess.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, you brought up Paul Rogers,
yeah.
who's a friend of mine. He used to do music videos for the Daniels. Like
yeah.
that was, and it's the same thing. It's like you, kind of like I said, you just never know who is going where. You should obviously ask and make sure that your kind of intentions with your career are aligned. And if they're not, then maybe, you try to go, like I said, meet more like-minded people so that you kind of keep yourself, you kind of have to have a plan. I feel like every time we have a plan now, God or the universe kind of just laughs at it. But I feel like you initially should have a plan. And a lot of that is going to have to do, like I said, my career, it's been based on women in particular, advocating for me. But they only were able to do that because they knew who I was. And they knew who I was because I was in their face like, all the time. Like this is what I want to do. And then you have to have sort of the like talent, not necessarily, it's like work ethic, talent. It's a lot of things to sort of back up the way you're pitching yourself. Because one thing I found a lot of people do is they try to like kind of play the game of getting to where they need to go, but they haven't necessarily done the work. So when they get there, it's kind of a disaster. And people very quickly see that they haven't done the work and they don't necessarily know the things that they've said they know. And, I think you can fake it till you make it, as people say, up to a certain extent, but it's really about it's opportunity and preparation meeting. Like that's how you end up where you really want to go. But I have a lot of social anxiety that I have to try to like usurp in order to just network and meet people. And it's like you have to, whatever you feel like is keeping you from going where you need to go, you have to figure out a way around that wall. Like you just have to. And there are people like editors are some of the nicest people. Like you could really just reach out and talk to them and ask them questions. Like Nicholas said, you're not going to get blocked. You're not going to get that unsubscribe. You're not going to, it's going to be like, very open. And I like meeting younger people who are trying, like are really like dedicated to trying to do and passionate about editing. So just, reach out to people you admire, I think.
And also like selfishly, just to add on what you're saying, like it's good for us also to be able to recommend people when we can't do a job. It's a nice thing to be able to say, oh, I can't, but do you want recommendations? And if they say yes, if you know a few other people who are looking, I try to be as generous as I can while being honest with recommendations. So if you've sent me links to your work and I've seen them and we've talked maybe and like and somebody has a job, I'll absolutely recommend you if I can actually believe you're serious about it and want to do the work. So and I've benefited from that too. And so I think that's a huge part of it. Is starting out, a lot of jobs came from a group of editors meeting each other and being like, I can't do this, but you should, or
Yep.
That's a good point. I'm still at that point where I'm most of my work is still in the corporate world, and I've only like done a few projects, narrative projects. I mean, So it's interesting to see all of your perspectives here. My goal, is to kind of like enter the narrative world without like moving anywhere because I want to stay where I am. So in Poland, but remote work is getting real. So I hope that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hope there is a future that I'm imagining in my head.
It's fun that you mentioned that the remote thing, because I'm not from here. I'm from Brazil. So and it was a thing that I wanted to do, like to move countries, not necessarily for work, but it was a different situation. I wanted to move, but what I noticed here in the U.S., because first I was living in New York, and I really noticed that was easier to land the type of jobs that I wanted to in Los Angeles. So that's why I moved to Los Angeles. So I know that, like you're saying, like it would be better. I don't know, even if I could do that from Brazil and stuff. But I noticed that being here made things easier for me, at least in the perspective of being a foreigner, not being American. I think it's different because I had a different career in Brazil. I have done a lot of jobs there. I worked for many years, but it's not the same to just come here and say, yeah, I have that experience. People will say, yeah, and I don't know. So it was easier for me to be in LA because I think the pond's bigger here than in New York. That's what I felt. So people are more willing to trust you, and then you, like Daysha was saying, you have to be ready when you have the good opportunity. If you're not ready, because opportunities don't come that easy, so you got to be prepared, and then you can show really your work. But I felt, for me at least, everyone has a different experience, but the location where I was made a huge difference for the type of jobs that I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to move, but just giving my
I know
my
you're
unique
right
perspective.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where is everyone?
Los
Yeah, I'm in
Angeles.
LA. Yeah.
Los
LA.
Angeles.
Oh,
Usually Los Angeles, right now New
but
York.
currently New York. Okay.
Yep.
Poland here, so a little different part of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
Oh,
I'm the only
man.
full-time New York-based person here.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I tried.
I think about it. I've done two movies here and I love it. I just, my family, I'm from LA originally, so it's a harder thing to
Yeah.
if I had moved there just for work. But I've had this conversation with other friends who are in film or creative things about moving or not, and yeah, grass is a little bit greener because once you get tied to a location for work, and then you think like, would I necessarily live here if it weren't for work? And it comes a little bit back to work-life balance thing in some ways. So it's, I'm not saying it's, I don't know. I often don't, even though I'm from Los Angeles, I often am not sure that that's where I would design my life to live if other things were possible. So it's worth thinking about if,
Yes.
yeah. But I will say there is that part of hiring an editor where I think if they can get a read on you in person, there is a part of that will be hard to ever get away from because, they have to deal with you for months and months and alone in a room, or even if it is remote, it's hard to get a read off someone without being in person. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and I guess the last
so
question.
you gotta move here.
I'll think about it.
I want to. Well, let's do a trade. I want to go cut something in Poland.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Actually, I a short film for a director from actually shot the film in New York. So, and he told me that his next project he does, he actually flies in it with me. So,
Amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully, like fingers crossed. Yeah, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the last question probably from Ricky asks, how is the WGA strike?
Well, I've been laid off. Friday was my last day. They shut down Post because the showrunner wasn't gonna show up anymore. So it's directly affecting me. But I fully support them, and I think that things that they are fighting for are, and one of them is just AI, but I think they're really kind of fighting for the sort of survival of their careers, like in their positions, because of some of what I thought was really cool was the way that they were so transparent about the deal that they were trying to make, and they put up the exact points that they were arguing, and the counters from the studios. It was very clear what was happening, and so it's been good to kind of see like, okay, this is what the actual problems are. I know mini rooms have been a problem. It's just that, studios are, as business people are trying to come at filmmaking from a strictly like business standpoint, and money and time and things like that, which are all obviously very important when it comes to filmmaking. But I think that there have been some steps that have been made, especially with how huge streaming has become, that have not considered the filmmaker. They have not considered the change in times, certainly not inflation. It's like no one thought about that. And I feel like the shrinking of time. I think Nicholas said earlier that it felt like every project he was on was getting the time we get to make it is shorter and shorter, and all of that is about the bottom line. But they do these mini rooms where they're creating scripts before they even pick up the show, and it's just like I fully understand what they're fighting for, and I think that our union is going to have to come at it harder when we come back around to this, because there are things like we talked about with AI that if we don't address it and set those boundaries as soon as possible, they could just kind of take off with it the same way streaming happened. It was like, well, let's see, we'll check in every year and see how streaming does, and it's like, okay, streaming is a multi-billion-dollar like thing and it's like no one who made the actual thing is getting paid from it. So long story short, I think the strike is going to like affect all of us, because what happens with them, what happens with the DGA, what happens with SAG, all kind of reflects what's going to happen with us as well. So I think paying very close attention to it to see what happens.
Yeah, we're talking about it now on this movie, which is an interesting one because it is for MGM, but it's really a passion and project and artistic thing for the filmmakers, and they're both writers. The producer and the director wrote the script together. So, they very much want to finish this movie. They don't want it to go into anything, but we are in the middle. We haven't done our final ADR. So there's stuff that's like, we're not, nobody wants to go around that. So it's an interesting case, but it's a tricky one, and everything Daysha said is right on. And I could talk a lot about this from my involvement with the union and stuff, but there's a lot of great people working really hard on it, both in and out of the guild boards and elected positions and paid positions, but we also have a legacy of a really defeated labor movement in the United States, and we have a kind of corporate labor structure that's very and a much more engaged younger group of people coming in who are like, wait, why does it have to be this way? Why do we negotiate separately? Why don't we all strike together? Wouldn't we have more leverage? And coming up against these historical limitations from the past 50 years of the labor movement that have made it actually much more favorable to the companies, the way all of this happens. So, yeah, totally in favor of the strike. Wish we could actually leverage more because, it's clearly going more the way of the rest of the economy, with they keep a few incredibly well-paid individuals at the top and then a growing lower base and no middle. And the middle's going out, and my parents were in the industry, or my dad, and there was a bit more of a middle 20, 30 years ago that now, there isn't. And it's going to go the way the rest of the economy has if we don't do something. We should have done something last time. We should have done something the time before that. We should have. So, it's crazy, but they're making tons of money. No matter what they say, they are making tons of money.
And it's interesting. Like for me, it's not affecting me yet because the unions, they don't regulate documentaries. So that's
Right.
also like a thing that I don't know should change, because it's a
Absolutely.
separate genre, but it's still like people are working, just has the same problems, and but the union, I feels like especially the editors guild is not that uh, interested in documentaries, I'd say, to use a better word. And that's not good. I hope it changes in the future. But yeah, so no, there's no effect because documentaries, the Writers Guild doesn't they don't regulate really documentaries. So I'm working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad because I wish they were more involved in it, but it feels like a genre more relegated to the side when it shouldn't. They're making
Right.
tons of money with documentary now, the streamings, and
Exactly.
a lot, and they should, I don't know, be more
Yeah.
connected to that.
I mean, documentaries are so much cheaper for them to make. And
yeah, and give
Yeah,
a lot
you know,
of
you
money.
can get a lot of viewing hours out of a documentary series.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really such a cash cow for them. But and I guess documentary editors are also. I'm also currently working on a documentary, and documentary editors are getting squeezed so much in this new, very corporatized documentary world. It's not nearly as, I don't know, like edgy and marginal as it once was.
Yes,
And I
totally.
think that the union hasn't quite caught up with that reality yet. So I really hope
Not at
they
all.
do
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy because I mean, it's crazy to me that documentary editors aren't considered an above the line position, and in fact, other editors too. It's crazy to me that we don't just share royalties on everything with everybody on the crew, but nobody talks about that other than maybe Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. But generally,
Exactly.
that should be. But then it's even crazier that on a documentary you can be doing that level of creative input and not have a stake in the creative future of the thing whenever that
Yeah.
doesn't
Right.
happen. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a good
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially a writer on, any editor is essentially a writer on a documentary.
yeah.
Right.
I say that about
Somebody-
reality TV too. Reality TV editors
Totally.
Right.
are writers,
Yeah.
producers. They are
Well-
making each scene. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also some scripted stuff where, I worked on a scripted feature that had 192 hours of footage once.
Oh, wow.
So debatable whether that's a documentary at that point.
I'd say it is. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
feels like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodness.
One thing I will say about the strike that's interesting is that so Appendage was made with Hulu, and it was made in a time where Hulu was funding, a bunch of these $2 million horror films. And 2 weeks ago they laid off that whole department, and that department no longer exists. They're not going to be doing that anymore. And so I don't know if they're gearing up to be paying more for residuals or gearing up to just be just trying to save money in general with Bob Iger at the helm. But pre-strike there was definitely like a willingness to make content from the studios, at least the streamers, that we might see dwindle a little bit or just change. But I guess I feel lucky that we got to make Appendage when we did, because it's a weird script, and we didn't get a lot of pushback, and the studio was really creatively awesome. And so, I hope that, weird movies still get made, and, they might not have pre-distribution in the future, or at least in the short-term future, who knows. But I do feel very lucky that we got that opportunity when we could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
guys.
sorry. Go on.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I hope we have a non-corporate media too that we can work for at some point,
Right. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that would be ideal in a lot
Yeah,
of
that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we already exceeded the time frame that I asked you for. So first of all, thank you once again for joining us, for sharing your insights. I appreciate all of you. Thank you to Ricardo, who was managing the live stream. And I hope we get to do it again. I hope we get to do it again. By the way, 2 hours has passed like I don't know, like fraction of the time. I don't know. So thank you,
Lots
thank
to
you.
talk about.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's my definition of like having good time. How weird am I? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Absolutely.
This is great. Thank you for having
Yeah.
us for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much.
much.
It was
Thank
it was lovely meeting you all, and I also just wanted to say I really enjoyed watching all of your films too. So thanks
Same.
for sharing.
Good.
Same.
Me too.
Same
Great
here.